What if the safest and most studied supplement in the history of sports nutrition could, depending on how it is used, become a real risk after the age of 50? It sounds contradictory, but unfortunately it is happening. Creatine has moved beyond the gym crowd, that young audience training for aesthetics and muscle growth, and has started filling the shelves of older adults looking for strength, energy, and a better quality of life as the years go by. And no, we are not saying this to sell you anything. You will not see any brand promotions or links in this video. Creatine truly is the most science-backed supplement out there. The point is that there are some common mistakes many people make when taking creatine that, beyond wasting all of its potential, can also cause real damage to your body. That is why today you will learn the most common ones and how to avoid them. Because these are small mistakes, many people underestimate them, and that is exactly where the danger lies. A small mistake repeated every single day can cause serious harm, from your wallet all the way to the worst-case scenario, your health. Stay with me until the end because I never see anyone talking about number 6. Error number 1, taking it on an empty stomach. A lot of people have the habit of taking creatine on an empty stomach, right after waking up, thinking it will speed up absorption or even enhance the effects. But that logic simply does not hold up in practice, especially after the age of 50 when the digestive system no longer works with the same efficiency it did in youth. What happens is that an empty stomach tends to be more sensitive, and creatine, even though it is extremely safe, can cause gastric discomfort, a bloated feeling, or even mild nausea in some people in this age group. This does not mean the supplement is harmful, but rather that fasting is not the ideal scenario for your body to absorb the compound in the best possible way. What many people do not know is that having food in the stomach, especially a source of carbohydrates, helps stimulate the release of insulin, a hormone that facilitates the transport of creatine into muscle cells. In other words, taking it with a meal, or at least close to one, tends to be more beneficial than taking it on a completely empty stomach. The practical recommendation here is simple. Include creatine in one of your main meals, preferably one that contains some source of carbohydrates such as fruit, oats, or whole grain bread. If you feel that your stomach is more sensitive in the morning, avoid taking it before eating anything, and prioritize breakfast or lunch instead. If you have gastritis, acid reflux, or any other diagnosed digestive condition, talk to your doctor before deciding on the best time, since everybody reacts differently. Error number 2, worrying about blood test results and stopping creatine. A common mistake is to panic when routine blood tests show a slight increase in creatinine levels and, because of that, abandon creatine thinking it is damaging your kidneys. But in the vast majority of cases, that increase does not represent any kidney damage whatsoever. Creatinine is simply a natural byproduct of creatine metabolism in the muscles, and when you increase your intake of the supplement, it is expected that this marker will rise slightly on the test. This is different from actual kidney dysfunction, which would be identified by other indicators such as the glomerular filtration rate, and not by creatinine alone. Studies that follow healthy people using creatine over long periods do not show any harm to kidney function. The problem is that many general practitioners without the context of supplementation may interpret that number in isolation and recommend stopping it without any real need. Before stopping on your own, the ideal approach is to let your doctor know that you are using creatine at the time of the exam. That way, they can order additional tests, such as a cystatin C measurement, which is less affected by supplementation, to get a more complete picture of your kidney function. If you already have a diagnosed pre-existing kidney disease, then supplementation should indeed be discussed carefully with your nephrologist, since that is a very different scenario from a healthy person taking the supplement. Error number 3. Not increasing hydration when starting creatine. Another mistake I see many people make is starting supplementation without adjusting their water intake. Creatine has an osmotic property, which means it draws water into muscle cells, increasing intracellular retention. This is actually one of the reasons creatine works so well, since that greater cellular hydration promotes protein synthesis and muscle volume. The problem is that if you do not increase your overall fluid intake, your body may direct more water into the muscles and leave less available for the rest of your bodily functions. After the age of 50, the sensation of thirst naturally decreases, and many people are already living in a mildly dehydrated state without realizing it. Add to that the action of creatine, and the risk of relative dehydration increases, which can show up as headaches, fatigue, muscle cramps, or even dizziness, symptoms that are often mistakenly attributed to the supplement itself. The practical recommendation is to gradually increase your fluid intake when starting creatine, aiming for around 68 to 85 fluid ounces of water per day, adjusted according to your body weight, level of physical activity, and the climate in your region. Drinking water throughout the entire day rather than all at once also promotes more balanced absorption. If you have any fluid restriction prescribed by your doctor, such as in cases of heart failure or kidney disease, it is essential to adjust this recommendation with your physician before increasing your hydration on your own. Error number 4. Getting scared by the scale at the beginning. It is extremely common for the scale to show an increase in body weight during the first few weeks of use, and this frightens a lot of people who interpret that number as fat accumulation. But in the overwhelming majority of cases, that gain is simply water being retained inside muscle cells. As we already explained, creatine increases intracellular hydration, and this process can represent a gain of 2 to 4 pounds in the first few weeks, depending on the dose used and the individual response of your body. This is not fat, it is not harmful swelling, it is actually a sign that the supplement is doing exactly what it is supposed to do. What many people do not know is that this intramuscular water retention also contributes to a fuller and firmer appearance of the muscles and creates a more favorable environment for muscle growth over the medium and long term. Instead of focusing exclusively on the scale, prefer to track other indicators, such as body measurements, progress photos taken consistently under the same lighting conditions and at the same time of day, or even how your clothes are fitting. These parameters tell a much more complete story than an isolated number on the scale. If this weight gain comes along with visible swelling in the legs, hands, or face, or difficulty breathing, those are not expected signs from creatine and deserve medical evaluation, since they may indicate other health issues unrelated to the supplement. Error number 5. Ignoring interactions with medications. After the age of 50, it is common for a large portion of the population to be taking some type of ongoing medication, whether for blood pressure, cholesterol, diabetes, or other conditions. And a dangerous mistake is starting creatine without considering how it might interact with those medications. The main area of concern involves medications that already place a burden on the kidneys by nature, such as certain non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs taken on a continuous basis, some diuretics, and certain antibiotics. Since creatine is metabolized and eliminated by the kidneys, combining its use with substances that also demand that same kidney work can, in theory, increase the load on those organs, especially if there is already some pre-existing kidney vulnerability. Another point of attention involves diabetes medications, since some studies suggest that creatine may have a slight influence on glucose metabolism, which reinforces the importance of monitoring blood sugar levels more closely during this period of adjustment. This does not mean you need to avoid creatine if you use these medications, but rather that this combination should never be decided on your own, without guidance. What many people do not know is that all it takes is a quick conversation with your doctor or pharmacist, bringing the complete list of medications you take to find out if there is any specific contraindication for your case. Never start supplementation while hiding from your doctor that you are on continuous medication, and always inform them as well if you begin taking creatine during a treatment that is already underway. Error number 6. Mixing it into shakes. Here we are at the mistake I promised at the beginning of the video, and one that almost nobody ever mentions. Mixing creatine into protein shakes, thick juices, or blended drinks might seem convenient, but it hides a problem that most people have never noticed. Creatine is a relatively dense powder, and when mixed into thicker liquids or cups that have residue from other ingredients such as whey protein, oats, or blended fruit, a significant portion of it can stick to the bottom of the glass or blender. This means you may be consuming far less than the dose you actually measured and set aside. Unlike thinner beverages like water, where creatine dissolves almost completely with a light stir, denser liquids make that dissolution more difficult, and much of the powder ends up settling on the walls and bottom of the container, being discarded without you even realizing it. The most efficient and waste-proof recommendation is simple. Instead of mixing creatine into shakes, place the daily dose directly in your mouth with the help of a spoon and swallow it right away with a good gulp of water. That way, you ensure that 100% of the dose actually entered your body, without the risk of leaving part of it forgotten at the bottom of a glass. If you prefer to dissolve it, always use very thin liquids, such as plain water, stir well before drinking, and finish the entire glass, taking extra care not to leave any residue at the bottom. Error number 7. Not considering body weight and lean mass when determining the dose. A mistake I see many people make is following the same standard dose of around 175 thousandths of an ounce per day found on the packaging, without considering their own body weight and how much lean muscle mass they actually have. But the need for creatine is not the same for everyone. The logic behind dosing is that creatine accumulates primarily in muscle tissue, so the greater a person's lean mass, the greater the storage capacity tends to be, and consequently the greater the daily need to keep levels saturated. A more individualized reference widely used in studies is around 0.03 to 0.05 grams of creatine per 2.2 pounds of body weight. This means that someone weighing 110 pounds will have a very different need from someone weighing 200 pounds, even if both are taking the same fixed dose found on most packaging. After the age of 50, there is also another relevant factor, which is the natural loss of muscle mass related to aging, scientifically known as sarcopenia, which can change your needs over time, especially if you are engaged in a strength training process to reverse that loss. The ideal approach is to calculate your dose based on your current weight, and if you are in the process of building muscle mass, reassess that number periodically. People with higher body weight or greater lean mass may benefit from doses closer to around 1/4 of an ounce per day, while smaller individuals can maintain solid results with roughly 1/10 to 1/7 of an ounce daily. Error number 8. Thinking you need to take it at a specific time. There is a fairly widespread myth that creatine needs to be taken at an exact time, whether before training, after training, or at some magical moment of the day for it to work properly. This mistake causes a lot of people to stress over logistics instead of focusing on what truly matters. The truth is that creatine works through muscular saturation over time, and not through an immediate effect like that of a stimulant pre-workout supplement. This means that the time you take it matters far less than the consistency of daily use. Some studies do suggest a slight advantage to taking it close to your workout time, possibly due to increased muscle blood flow during that period, but that difference is small and does not compromise results for those who prefer to take it at other times of day for the sake of convenience. What many people do not know is that the determining factor for successful supplementation is not the clock, but rather consistency. Taking it every single day, including days when you do not train, is what keeps your muscle creatine stores saturated and ensures long-term benefits. Choose a time that fits naturally into your routine, such as with a main meal, and stick to that same time every day. This predictability reduces the chances of forgetting, which is the true enemy of effective supplementation, far more so than whichever time you happen to choose. Error number 9. Choosing low-quality brands to try to save money. Trying to save money, many people opt for extremely cheap creatine brands with no clear origin or quality certifications, and end up compromising both the results and the safety of their supplementation. This is a mistake that can end up costing a lot in the long run. Good quality creatine monohydrate goes through purification processes that reduce the presence of contaminants that may be present in less rigorous manufacturing processes. Products of questionable origin may also have lower purity, delivering less active creatine than what is advertised on the label. A good way to assess quality is to check whether the creatine used by the brand has any international certification seal that guarantees the purity of the compound, generally related to independent quality testing of sports supplements. Reputable brands typically display this information clearly on the packaging or on their official website. After the age of 50, with the body already naturally more sensitive to low-quality substances, this care becomes even more relevant, since impurities can unnecessarily burden organs such as the liver and kidneys, even in healthy individuals. This does not mean you need to buy the most expensive option available on the market, but rather that you should prioritize brands with a good reputation, transparent labeling, and preferably independent purity testing, even if that means paying a little more per serving of the supplement. Error number 10. Taking insufficient doses out of fear. Finally, we arrive at a mistake that is practically the opposite of taking too much. Consuming insufficient amounts out of pure fear of creatine's effects, especially among older adults who have heard exaggerated stories or encountered outdated information about the supplement. This fear usually comes from old myths, such as the idea that creatine damages the kidneys in healthy people, a theory that has already been thoroughly debunked by decades of consistent research. The practical result of this fear is a dose so low that it is not even enough to saturate muscle stores, throwing away the supplement's real potential entirely. when the dose falls far below what is needed for your body weight and lean mass. As we discussed in error number 7, the benefits related to strength, muscle power, and even cognitive protection are significantly reduced, causing the person to think that creatine simply does not work for them. What many people do not know is that creatine monohydrate is one of the supplements with the largest volume of safety studies ever conducted, including research specifically involving older populations, with no evidence of harm in healthy individuals who follow adequate doses. If the fear comes from a specific health condition, the answer is not to reduce the dose on your own, but rather to have an open conversation with your doctor about your individual case. That way you make a decision based on real information and not on fears without scientific foundation, making the most of everything this supplement can offer for your health and quality of life after the age of 50. Now that you know the 10 main errors, let us move on to today's bonus mistake. Bonus error: thinking you absolutely need a loading phase. As today's bonus, we need to clear up a myth that still persists quite a bit among those who are just getting started. The idea that it is mandatory to go through a loading phase for creatine to work, taking high doses, generally close to around 7/10 of an ounce divided throughout the day, during the first 5 to 7 days. This strategy does exist and has scientific backing, being effective for saturating muscle creatine stores more quickly in about 1 week, instead of waiting the 3 to 4 weeks needed with the fixed daily dose protocol. But fast does not mean necessary. What many people do not know is that at the end of 1 month of continuous use, muscle creatine levels are practically equivalent between those who went through a loading phase and those who started directly with the maintenance dose, generally between roughly 1/10 and 1/6 of an ounce per day. The difference lies only in the speed at which that plateau is reached, and not in the final outcome over the medium and long term. For people over the age of 50, skipping the loading phase tends to be even more comfortable, since high doses all at once can increase the chance of gastrointestinal discomfort, especially in a digestive system that is already naturally more sensitive as the years go by. If you are not in a hurry to see the first results, and the vast majority of people have no need for that urgency, the more comfortable and equally effective path is simply to start directly with the maintenance dose appropriate for your body weight, without worrying about going through that more intense and uncomfortable initial phase. If you enjoyed this and also want to see in an unbiased way all the reactions that creatine can cause in your body after the age of 50, both the good ones and the bad ones, we have a video appearing on screen right now showing each and every one of them. Make sure to check it out. Thank you for watching all the way to the end, and may God bless you, my friend.